Hi, welcome to theAnalysis-news. I'm Paul Jay. We are living in a moment, if American media is to be believed, that is the most dangerous moment in geopolitics since the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's CNN's over and over line. I don't know that it's actually that dangerous, but there's no doubt when there's nuclear weapons on both sides, it's dangerous. Now joining us in a few seconds will be a political analyst from Kiev in Ukraine and from Moscow in Russia. And we'll be back in just a few seconds. Don't forget, please, there's a donate button, subscribe button, share button. We need your support if we're going to keep doing all this. Back in a few seconds. As in all lead up to wars, during wars, almost wars, there's an enormous amount of misinformation. Even people that are supposed to be on the same side can't get on the same page. Last I looked, when asked, President Biden and his national security people are saying a Russian invasion of the Ukraine has begun. Last I saw, the head of the European Commission, which is the executive committee of the European Union, when asked the same question, said no, an actual invasion hasn't begun. The Russian troops that are in Donetsk have already been there. So even these people who are supposed to be leaders of the, you would have to call them the anti-Russian camp, are not agreeing with each other. But there's no doubt the situation has gotten more serious. And last report I saw, Ukraine is about to declare emergency rule, a kind of martial law. So now joining us to talk about what's going on is, first of all, joining us from Kiev is Andrei Buzarov. He's originally from Donetsk. He currently lives, as I say, in Kiev. He's a political scientist, security analyst, and academic. And now also joining us from Moscow is our friend Alexander Buzgalin. He's a professor, director of the Center of Modern Marxist Studies at Moscow State University. He's a vice president of the World Political Economy Association. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
So, Andre, start off with, where are we at? I mean, is it your understanding that has actually been what is called an invasion, and what's happening in terms of emergency law? But start with, is there actually an invasion or not?
Yes, it is invasion. It was invasion, and I think this is the most correct description of what is we have now, and what we have had during the last 8 years. As you mentioned, I am originally from Donetsk, and my mother, she has been living in Donetsk for the last 8 years after the beginning of the conflict in 2014. But now she's here, and she's supposed to go to Donetsk from Kiev to Donetsk 2 days ago. But unfortunately, this escalation happened, and there was very serious political move by Putin about the recognition of the self-proclaimed territories of Donbass, the so-called self-proclaimed republics. I mean, the Donetsk and Lugansk regions, which we call generally Donbass. And this is a geographic special term of the east of Ukraine. That's why, for me, it's a personal thing. It's a personal, very important negative situation, because I'm realizing now this seriousness of the situation. Because during the last 8 years, the Russian did not recognize these territories as independent states, and it was a hybrid influence on Russia. But on the other hand, all of the world, the majority of the democratic world and the Ukrainian government, the majority of Ukrainians understood and understand now that certainly it was a Russian direct invasion in 2014, and now we have a new phase of the hybrid, I would say, invasion, of the real invasion. And during the last 8 hours, I have in Telegram a lot of direct messages from the east of Ukraine, and we see the replacement of the armed forces of Russian Federation from Russia to this self-proclaimed territory. So it would be official, I would say, officially a real huge military base, a really buffer zone with the armed forces of Russian Federation. Now officially we see. So this is the last news, last facts. It's very difficult to analyze in long-term forecast in long-term perspective what will be, for example, tomorrow, because we can analyze only this hour and the last hours.
So, and you were a little surprised by this, I think. You were interviewed by the show The Barricade, which we ran on the analysis just a few days ago. And you thought this was possible, but you didn't expect it unless there was a real increase in tension. And I don't, was there such an increase in tension? The Russians are saying there was, that Ukrainian armed forces were actually getting more aggressive towards Donbass.
Well, you know, Paul, that it's very interesting thing about what we anticipated several days, sorry, ago, because subconsciously, I realized that Putin would recognize these territories because this is uh, some kind of new step. Personally, by Putin towards his plan, but on another hand, I did not want to believe, and I did not want to even imagine that the recognition of these territories can be, because I saw the South Ossetian conflict, because my ethnicity is Ossetian, and I was born in Ukraine in Donbass, but my father from Ossetia, and I know how was the conflict in the South Ossetia in 2008. So if we compare the two conflicts now, the recognition of the South Ossetia and Abkhazia, which were the territory of Georgia, and if we compare the recognition of Lugansk and Donetsk, these regions as a self-proclaimed independent states, like we saw 2 days ago, we would see the total similarity of the political steps. But there is one important difference: the borders, the front line, because that now when Putin recognized the territories, he recognized the territories not only within the actual borders of these proclaimed entities, how they call it. He said yesterday, he explained that he recognized all the region, which is also not occupied, like a part of this new self-proclaimed territory. So it's a new phase of the conflict, actually, because in accordance with the acts of these separatists, with the constitution of separatists, the borders of their imagined state should be much more bigger than they have now. So Putin actually uh, recognized not only the current situation, the current borders of these two new self-proclaimed republics, but he actually recognized that all the region, which also now occupied by the Ukrainian government, should be the part of this new two republics. So this is a new phase, new reality, which even foreign experts, which saw a lot of things in the past, and Ukrainian experts cannot now understand and cannot explain in the nearest perspective.
Alexander, what's your take? Why recognize these regions as independent republics at this point, and why recognize areas that are actually currently occupied by the Ukrainian army?
So a few comments about language and methodology. When we are speaking about civilized world, democratic world, and Russia, this is first of all very specific characteristic. We are democratic, we are civilized, you are, I don't know who. Second, people in Donetsk and Lugansk during 8 years are in the situation of war. It was not occupation 8 years ago. It was uprising of people who didn't want it to be under the supervision of new Kiev authorities. with a lot of nationalism, Ukrainian, and many other negative features. And separatist and uprising of people who want to be independent from reactionary government, two big differences. Then invasion. When the United States came to Estonia, it's not invasion. It is invitation of people, of army, of troops who are our friends. It's okay, no problem. Here, invasion. Why? Because there is international law. It was a lot of examples when civilized democratic governments of NATO countries forgot about these international laws during last half a century, maybe 1 century. It was dozens and dozens times. So it's important. Another very important aspect, so-called geopolitics as main sphere of analysis. I prefer to analyze social economic relations, interests of ordinary people, interests of business and big business of different countries, interest of bureaucracy of different countries. And this is another analysis. Let's ask not if it is invasion, if it is according or not according to the one or another international law. Let's put another question. What is interest of the peoples of Donetsk and Lugansk? If they want to be independent, why not? I can say the same about any region of Russia. If they decide that it's better to be together with Ukraine, okay, no problem. But what they will receive as a result of joining to Ukraine? If they decide that it is better inside Ukraine, no problem. If people of Donetsk and Lugansk think that it is better for them not to be under the supervision of Poroshenko or another president and leader of Ukraine, together with Bandera groups and so on, it's their choice. And they can make this choice. If Slovak people decided not to be together with Czech people in Czechoslovakia, why not? It can be, I don't know, decision of Slovak people to be together with Russia. Why they cannot be together with Russia and invite Russian troops, not NATO troops? If they decide to do this, why not? Why to invite Americans is okay. To invite NATO is okay. To invite Russia is something absolutely extraordinary, not democratic, and so on. So let's put this question as main question. During 8 years, thousands and thousands of people were wounded and killed in Donetsk and in Donbass. Ukraine had 8 years to say, we understand your interests. We respect your interests. We want to give you as much as independence inside Ukraine as you want. It's normal decision. And they did not want to go out from Ukraine. They wanted to be part of Ukraine, but with special conditions of self-reproduction as federal republics inside federal state. Why not? No decision, nothing. And artillery and bombarding, guns, shooting. 150 kids killed. There is memorial with names of the kids. For what? So this is key questions. And now key question is not the intervention of Russia. Key question is it better for people of Donetsk and Lugansk to be independent from Ukraine, or it's worse for them? This is question. And I think the answer which they gave, really, it's better for us to be outside, not inside Ukraine. It's their answer. And I think we can and must respect this choice of people, like in Crimea, like in different other countries. It could be in any part of the world, and we must use this, principle, basic principle of self-independence, self-determination of nations, of peoples, of ethnic groups. By the way, I don't agree with our president, who said that it was Bolsheviks and Lenin who made terrible construction when any republic can withdraw from Soviet Union. It was in the constitution of Soviet Union. It was very perfect and very democratic. In some aspects, formal, of course, but it was perfect decision. It's the only basis for real union when everybody is free to live, and when we are together, not because it is the obligation, not because there is big boss who will kill you if you leave, but because it's better for you. It's better for economic development. It's better for technological development. It's better for human development. It's better for peace. So this is first very important social economic analysis of interests.
Okay, well,
By
let
the
me
way,
ask.
Russia is not.
Let's ask Andre that question that you raised.
Yes,
Andre.
1 minute I will comment
Okay.
briefly, and then
Okay, go ahead.
Andrei will take the floor to argue. Second aspect, which is very important, much more broad and difficult. What is better for world security, for peaceful development of the world? When we have one world policeman, NATO, with the United States as a power, center of this power, or it's better to have 2 or 3 policemen who can participate in the decision of world geopolitical, so-called geopolitical problems. Is it better to have competitors for US and NATO or not? We had last talk with you, Paul, discussion. Why US can put base near border of Russia and Russia cannot build base, military base on the border of United States in Mexico or in Cuba? Why not? If for, I don't know, security of Baltic republics, it's necessary to have NATO in Baltic republics. Maybe this is choice of Baltic republics people. But if Cuban people decide that it's better to have Russian troops and Russian fleet in Cuba, why not? This is choice of Cuban people. And in Estonia, according to NATO rhetoric, there is no threat for Russia. In Baltic republics, there is no, if NATO in Baltic republics, there is no threat for Russia. It's absolutely peaceful. Great. Russian base in Cuba, no threat for United States, only peace. Or Russia is aggressive because it is Russia. And NATO and United States are peaceful because this is United States and NATO. So, and final remark, very important. In Russia, we have some imperialist intentions of big business, intentions of bureaucrats. We have nationalists, chauvinists, who wants to start really aggressive steps. We have such circles, but this is not official policy. We have terrible economic and social policy of our government, and I'm criticizing this all time. I'm not stupid lover of everything what is done by our state. But now I'm talking not about Putin, not about even Biden or anybody else or Zelensky. I'm talking about peoples in Ukraine, peoples in Donetsk, peoples in Russia. What is better for them? This is key question. Yes, now maybe Andrei or your questions, Paul.
Well, go ahead, Andre. That's answer the question. What's better for the peoples?
You know
Donbass?
that I think Paul, thank you for your word. I think we have now a very different position, ideological position between Alexandra and Andrei. I think it would be a discussion like between the soccer player and basketball player, you know? And what is better, soccer or basketball? I would.
I'm sorry, one minute for interruption. The question is, if soccer or basketball play is killing people, it's necessary to have such discussion.
I think that now the most, no, I mean, for me personally, for me as a citizen of Ukraine, now the most important thing what will be next, and not what we are during these last 8 years. Here in Kiev and in Ukraine, and the people, and them, like a man originally from Donetsk, and I have been lived 28 years in Donetsk, and I cannot now say on behalf of Ukrainian government or local some other bodies in the Donbass or on behalf of Russia. I speak now on behalf of myself as an expert. It's a very important thing. And as an expert, as a citizen of Ukraine, I think that the question what will be next is much more important in comparison with the question what will, because I know what will better than many other people and experts. And I think that if we analyze the situation now, despite what were the previous, what were the historical prerequisites, because we can analyze also situation which were before 2014 and 100 years ago. Now it's very difficult to foresee, to give a real forecast for the next month. Unfortunately, after the recognition of these republics, whatever was the motivation, it depends on the Putin himself. And I think that, I mean, the motivation. I think that it's now very probable to see the military escalation. And I always supported any kind of diplomatic efforts, any kind of diplomatic resolution that, despite some of Russian society and Ukrainian society, and against any diplomatic moves. There are right wing in Russian expert society which against any kind of diplomatic steps towards Ukraine. There are very radical, I emphasize, very radical nationalist group in Ukraine which against any kind of consensus. And now, unfortunately, after the last days, I see that the consensus now impossible, unfortunately. And maybe it can be possible, the diplomatic efforts can play some role in a year or in a month, I don't know. It depends on the following events. However, now I intuitively feel the tendency towards escalation. And I don't know what will be the trigger, the reason for the escalation, but the probability is very, very high. And the biggest problem now that we don't have actually any kind of diplomatic effort or platform under surveillance, under control of Europeans or United States or post-Soviet countries. We don't have now a platform or any format for negotiation, because the old format which we used to see during last 8 years, the Normandy format, which was bad, but it was, I think it died. The format like a diplomatic platform, unfortunately.
Andre, the Minsk agreement, which, if I understand correctly, was supposed to, Ukrainian government was supposed to allow a significant amount of autonomy for Donbass. Now, now, if I'm correct, the Ukrainian government really didn't live up to the Minsk agreement. Is that not one of the underlying issues here?
Paul, the Normandy format, which I mentioned, the France, German, Russian, and the Ukraine, there are 4 countries. They created these Minsk agreements, and they created this Minsk platform for communicating between the participants of this conflict. But it failed. It failed because of the many reasons. If you ask, well, myself, me, I mean, or official government of Ukraine or Russian Federation or Germans or France, what was the reason of failure of these agreements, it would be in different or distinguishing different explanations why it happened. And Minsk agreements, which were recognized by everybody. The Minsk agreements was recognized by United States, by France, German, Ukrainian, and Russian, and other countries, even Great Britain. They were not actually fulfilled because of the different reasons. And if you ask Russians, they will say that Ukrainians did not fulfill them. If you ask our government, the previous one and the current, they will say that Russians did want to implement. So it's now very difficult to find truth about many things. And the truth now that we have the result of this 8 years diplomatic semi-frozen conflict, I would say, because I never called the conflict frozen. So now we see the new reality, absolutely new reality, and new political and I would say regional reality.
Okay,
Which,
so so how do you answer Alexander's fundamental question? Uh, I guess it's actually should be two parts, which what is better for the people of Donbass, and how do we actually find out what the people of Donbass want? And, would you accept that if the people of Donbass want independence from Ukraine, that they do have a right to have that?
it's a very strange question. I'm not telling to you, Paul. I used to hear this question for 8 years, and it's a very strange question because first of all, Donbass is separated on two now lines. There is Ukrainian Donbass and there is non-controlled area of Donbass. So if we speak about on behalf of all Donbass, you have asked all the Ukrainians. The second thing that if we speak about both parts of Donbass, even the party which the side which occupied now, or actually not controlled by official government, the majority of the people who live there, they are citizens of Ukraine. It's a very important thing. Not citizens of Russian Federation. There are, in accordance to the last statistics, maybe several thousand, several, not thousand, several, how to say? No, I mean,
Andrei, 1 million people put official documents to be citizens of Russia.
They are not. Fundamental question is another question. Fundamental. So the people of the people who live in Donbass, both sides, they are Ukrainians. The majority of them, they have Ukrainian citizenship. So the constitution of Ukraine, I'm tell you like a professional lawyer, because I know what is the law, what is the constitution, defends all the Ukrainians, all the citizens of Ukraine. In the question which raised Alexander is ideological question. It's not a juridical question, and it's not a political question. This is ideological question. And he took 8 years and he said, look, there is a people of Donbass and we listen to them. But if we analyze the history of the conflict, we should analyze all the facts. This is another story. And for me, for the Ukrainian citizen, for the expert, for the people of the who are originally from Donbass, it's a very sensitive question. And if somebody wants to speak with me about this topic, this person should be ready to organize very serious professional dialogue. But now I want to emphasize and to pay attention that the most important thing is what to be the next, and not what were the prerequisites. And this is, for me, is fundamental question.
Okay, let Alexander come in.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thank you.
First of all, when we are talking about social and class interest, every time all experts are trying to say this is not professional, this is ideology, this is not a sphere of professional argument, and so on. They will take constitution. Okay, Soviet constitution was broken in 1991. All leaders who created independent states in 1991 were criminals who made anti-constitutional step. And it was different referendums, different ideas. It's normal when constitution is broken. World is developing. We had monarchies, they were destroyed. We had different republics, they were changing. We are living in world which is changing. This is normal. Second, it's normal to have an opinion poll in Donbass and to ask if these people who has Ukrainian passport, okay, majority has Ukrainian passport. By the way, 1 million wrote document, we want to be citizens of Russia. We don't want to be citizens of Ukraine. During last days and maybe weeks, I don't remember exactly. So let's ask these people if they want to be inside Ukraine. Referendum, very democratic. Is this ideology? About future development of events. I want to stress, if Russian government will make absolutely crazy step and use army to move in the direction of Kiev or any other city of Ukraine. I tell next minute, this is terrible crime. But if Ukrainian army will attack now seriously, and not seriously, because, okay, we had many days when artillery is shooting and people in small villages and small towns and so on are under the artillery attack. And this is permanent. The same from Donbass, they are answering. So, but if it will be attack from Ukrainian army, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous, it's very sensitive. I cannot be objective expert, I'm sorry. If it is an attack of Ukrainian army, I will support all people who will be volunteers, and maybe not volunteers, but officers and soldiers of Russian army who will go to protect Donbass. And I supported in 2014 people who went to Donbass as volunteers. I know many of them. They were not soldiers, they were not officers. It was a voluntary step. It was people from United States, from Germany, from Asia countries, from different countries of former Soviet Union who came to Donbass to defend people of Donbass. It's also true. It was people in the Ukrainian army who came to participate in this battle from Ukrainian side. But for the future, there is very simple decision of Zelensky or any other leaders of Ukraine. We recognize that Donbass is independent. Okay, and now let's start economic, social, political, cultural competition. If Donbass people with open border to Russia and to Ukraine understand that it's better for us to live inside with Ukraine. In Russia, guys, you have terrible oligarchs. We have. In Russia, we have terrible bureaucrats. We have. In Ukraine, we have wonderful democratic government. In Ukraine, we have social responsible business who protect our lives, who gives us good jobs, who give us good wages. We want to be in Ukraine. We made terrible mistake. Russia is awful. Ukraine is wonderful. It's European democratic country with social justice, with strong trade unions, with real political freedom for left who are talking about socialism and communism and who says that the Soviet Union was good and they will not be in prison. And in Russia, it's awful. In Ukraine, there is no Nazi, like in France, for example, where it is forbidden. So Ukraine is wonderful, Russia is terrible. We want to be in Ukraine. We vote for the journey to Ukraine. You win, you have victory. Russia go out. We are now again part of Ukraine. Very simple decision. Peace. Why not? So again, I am against any attack of Russian troops from Donbass to any other territory of Ukraine. Question to Andrei. Will you, as citizen of Ukraine, not as independent expert, as citizen of Ukraine, as person with ideology, or maybe you don't have any ideology, I don't know. You're absolutely objective and you don't have any ideology. As person who has citizenship of Ukraine, will you support attack of Ukrainian army, serious attack, which will lead to the death of thousands, maybe 10, 20, 30, 100,000 people from both sides, attack of Ukrainian army on Donbass or not?
Oh, well, no. Paul, finally, I heard now a very fundamental, serious question, which is really fundamental about what will be the next. And the problem is that if you analyze the possibility of military action, if you would ask me, for example, Paul, you 3 days ago, the possibility about the military actions, like Washington Post and Wall Street Journal and New York Times and the Western media said during the last 3 weeks that it would be the imminent Russian attack of Ukraine. I would say that the attack is impossible because of the political and other reasons. and or de-escalation or provocation would be impossible. But after the last events, which we talked about, the recognition, the self-proclaimed republics, now I cannot be sure. I have any certainty that the war cannot happen. It cannot happen. Sorry. Why? If you analyze Ukrainian media, you will see, and you will ask any Ukrainian expert, you will see that we are here anticipating of the Russia invasion. If you ask the citizens of Ukraine who lived in the occupied territory, like we call it in accordance with the law, occupied territory, they are awaiting of the some kind of attack from Ukraine. If you read the Canadian or Western or German or Arab or other media, I analyze all the media all over the world and give the interview every day in different languages. You would see that the Western media always emphasize the inevitability, that the war will be inevitable, despite that our government, official government, unlike the American government, say that the war it's less probable, like the Western our allies see. So there is a very serious contradiction between Russia, the United States, Ukraine, and the United States, Ukraine and Russia. So it's very difficult to understand what would be the trigger. I don't want war, and I think, answering your question, I think the question about Alexander, I think that still we have a little chance to prevent some kind of bloodshed, but I think that the trigger of casus belli, as the international law said, can be any kind of provocation, or any kind of political decision to make some kind of attack. That's why it can be everything. Unfortunately, it can be everything. And I'm not a representative of official government, as I said, but now I see that the tense is so huge in the Donbass, because I every hour I communicate with my relatives, with my uncle who lives in Donetsk, and the tense is huge.
What do they want?
No, it's not a question what they want, because if you ask
it's very good reaction.
The people, if you ask the people in Kiev, in Donetsk, in Kharkov, in Odessa, in any city of Ukraine, everybody want peace. It's logic. As well, I also want peace. I don't want war, because I know what is war. It's terrible. But unfortunately, now the probability of the war is very, very, very high. And who will be the trigger of this war? I don't know. It depends on the many facts.
But in answer to Alexander's question, you would be opposed to any kind of Ukrainian military attack, assault on Donbass.
Well, Alexander asked me a question.
He says he would be opposed to any movement.
All his questions. He's a very intelligent man. He's an economist. He has PhD in economy. I have PhD in philosophy, and the discuss of philosopher and economist is a very amusing story, because you can ask me a lot of questions.
Andrei, I'm sorry, I am also professor of philosophy department.
You can ask me a lot of questions, because it is your choice. It's democratic, but I will give my answers.
Of course.
So, Paul. Please, sorry for interruption.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, he said he would consider it a crime if the Russian army moved towards Kiev. And then he asked you, would you be opposed to any kind of Ukrainian military initiative against Donbass? Which I assume that if both of you agreed that there needs to be peace, then I can't see how you both wouldn't agree with at least that proposition, that they should all stop shooting at each other.
Yes. So 1 minute.
So let me just go one step further. Doesn't this eventually get one way or the other? Doesn't it have to wind up with some kind of referendum here? I don't does there not also have to be an acceptance on the part of Ukraine that if the majority of people of Donbass want independence, they could have it. And the same thing, there has to be an acceptance on the part of Russia. If they lose that referendum, they have to get out of there.
You raised the same question as Alexander raised, and concerning the so-called referendum, because referendum in Crimea and in Donbass, they were not recognized by Ukrainian government.
Okay, but I'm talking about a future referendum.
And yes, I know, and I don't know what to shift to the historical things, because it's a lot of judicial think about the future referendum. It's a very uncommon question for me, because I don't think that the future referendum can be the key or some kind of new tool for resolving of the conflict. I don't believe that it's because of the political reasons possible, because I feel what is happening inside Ukraine, and I feel what is happening inside the Kyiv. I think that there isn't now, unfortunately, the understanding what kind of format or what kind of tool can be used to prevent or resolve the conflict. So now we see, even during the last 2 hours, I see the news. I saw the news, sorry, that we are waiting for the state of emergency. So next step, I would think that it would be martial law, but martial law not in Ukraine at all. I think in the area, so partly. That's why we see the tendency to the tense, not tendency to the diplomatic efforts, and and to the other tools, because what you say the referendum, this is the result of the diplomatic negotiation, which are now in deadlock, absolutely for 100 deadlock for the diplomacy, at least for today, unfortunately.
Alexander, go ahead.
First of all, it's impossible to have diplomatic negotiations, as Andrei said, because Zelensky can lose the power if he will not attack Donbass. And for him, this is more important than death of thousands of people. The same, by the way, it's normal for politicians when they're thinking about their career, their power, their money. If it is not a political leader, but economic leader, they're thinking about this, not about people, not about interests of ordinary citizens of one or another country. This is normal for capitalist system. Andrei will say that this is ideology. I will agree. This is ideology. This is Marxist ideology, socialist ideology. It's true. But you also have ideology of juridical fetishism, ideology of the recognition of Western media as the key source for information, and so on and so forth. It's and you are not answering on the direct questions because you are afraid to give the answer. Because you know that really you will say, yes, I will support a citizen of Ukraine, or at least I will keep silence if Ukrainian government will attack Donbass or Donetsk or Lugansk. And I will not keep silence if Russian government will start any aggressive actions, such kind. So this is difference between us. I'm also a philosopher. I'm director of the Center in Department of Philosophy, Moscow State University. And I published, I don't know, 100 articles in mainstream philosophy journals, academic journals in Russia. So we are in one side here. And you're talking a lot about economic questions. So this is not this question. Key question now is how to make peace.
Let me ask one question before we go there. It's why did Russia bring this to a head now with the recognition of these states? And why now?
Really, this is a question not to me. Yeah. But I think that it was necessary to make this step earlier, when it was a real uprising in Donbass, in Donetsk and Lugansk in 2014. And when they had really more democratic leaders, real heroes, not modern leaders, which are part of establishment, like in Russia, like in everywhere. I think the reason is in political games between leaders of United States and NATO, European Union, Russia, even Ukraine, Putin had some negotiations, indirect at least, with Zelensky, and Zelensky with Putin. They are playing game, and this is not very good idea. But final decision is, I think, because the Lugansk and Donetsk people and their leaders finally understood, if they will not make any decisive step, in the nearest future, Ukrainian army will attack Donetsk and Lugansk, and thousands of people will be killed, including kids, women, old people, and so on. I think they are right. It was more and more probable day by day that it will be such attack. I'm not secret service person. I'm not spy. I'm not anti-spy. I'm not KGB agent or SBU. It's KGB of Ukraine agent. I'm just professor. So that's why I don't have secret information. But according to atmosphere, this is the problem. And because of that, 1 minute, I'm finishing. And because of that, this growth of tension and growth of threat of attack of Ukrainian army against Donetsk and Lugansk, because of that, Donetsk and Lugansk decided to say we are independent. Before they did not say we want to be recognized as independent states. It was not such a requirement, if I am not mistaken. They said we want to be protected. We are afraid that it will be attacked and again will be blood like it was in 2014 when I don't know how many thousand people were killed. I think not less than tens of thousands of people were killed and wounded, maybe 100 from both sides, 1,000 people. So to protect this blood, and will it work or not now depends from Ukrainian leaders. If they start military attack on Donetsk and Lugansk, war will take place. If they will not start this attack and will say Russia and Russian leaders and the Russian people are terrible, they occupied our territory and so on, but will not attack, it will be peace. If they attack, war.
Last time
it's Zelensky and his team or anybody in Ukraine will decide peace or war, not Russia.
Last time we talked, Alexander, you were talking about how this tension serves all the oligarchs. The Russian oligarchs, the Russian military-industrial complex, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex, the American military-industrial complex. I mean, all the oligarchs, and I include the American oligarchs. They're all going to make money out of this conflict. There already are. Hundreds of millions of dollars are pouring into the Ukraine. The energy prices are going through the roof, which helps the fossil fuel, not just in Russia, but the American fossil fuel and the Saudis. I mean, there's money going to be made out of all of this crisis. How much of this is being on the Russian side? How much of this is a factor? And let me just say, first of all, speaking as a North American, and I'm a dual citizen, I'm a Canadian, I'm American, this very much drives American policy. Military-industrial complex, money and arms, fossil fuel and arms drives American foreign policy. And frankly, I'm also in Canada right now, and there's nothing other than trade and fossil fuel politics that drives Canadian foreign policy. So, you know, this Western democratic construct is as much bullshit and in fact, the Americans on the world stage have committed far more crimes than any other country in the world. No other country comes even close to what the United States has done. All that being said, how much of this bringing things to such a boiling point by the Russian state, how much is being driven by these kinds of motives?
It is such motive, it is such economic interest. Maybe this is again ideology, I don't know, but it is true from my point of view. Now I'm talking as a specialist in political economy and social economic relations in my country. And I told about this during more than 1 hour during last hour meeting. That's why I did not repeat this. And this is very important. By the way, when Putin in his speech said about oligarch bureaucratic regime in Ukraine, he described the same regime in Russia. So he didn't mention this, of course, but it is understandable for everybody. I had talked with many Russians. They said, oh, why he said this is Ukraine? Why he did not say that this is Russia? So it is bad smile, but smile, or maybe smile, but bad. I don't know how to say. So that's why we have this interest from top officials from big capital in any country who has military industrial complex. And this is all big countries. So, and in Russia, of course, this is also the problem, big problem. Nationalism, great power, chauvinism, military industrial complex, and so on. But this is, again, a big question. What is better, to have only now as world policemen, or to have also Russia, China, maybe anybody else, or maybe union between different countries, which will confront with NATO in some questions, or will have agreement with NATO? This is a big question for discussion. And from who will say what is better? For whom it is better? For big business, for bureaucrats, for peace, for majority of the citizens of the world, for whom it's better? So it's very fundamental question, because I can propose as left person very simple decision. Let's make socialist revolution in all countries in one day. Great decision, yeah, no problems. But this is fantasy, unfortunately. What we can propose, this is a united anti-fascist front, united peace movement, which we had in 1960s, and it was very important factor, which supported peace in the situation of terrible Cold War in 50s and 60s. It was initiated by different people. Some leaders of the West hated Stalin and Soviet Union and Khrushchev and all other leaders, but they said, okay, we are ready to be with these terrible guys, with this terrible Soviet Union, but in order to have peace. And the same was in Soviet Union. We had US professors who are slaves of the big business, but we are with them because they want to have peace. Maybe we can make the same global movement when anybody who will start military action will know that I don't know, 20, 30, 50 million people in all over the world will protest against this. When it was Iraqi war, New York Times wrote, in the world there are two powers, power of US Army and power of people who went to the streets of New York and London. In London, it was more than 2 million demonstration. My wife participated in this demonstration against war in Iraq. Maybe if now we have in all countries in Western Europe, in Ukraine, in Russia, these millions of people coming to the streets demonstrating against any type of war. Do whatever you want, but not use weapons, not kill people.
Okay, let me ask Andrei a question.
Sorry, you must interrupt me. I can talk.
Okay, well, I just did.
Yes, thank you. You can cut me.
Andrei, I heard I saw an interview, or it's actually an article with a Ukrainian scientist. And actually, could you just say a few things so we can get the camera on you?
Yes.
Yeah, there we go. I saw an interview with a Ukrainian scientist, and she was calling for Ukraine to take the NATO card off the table. That one, there's no way NATO's ever going to let Ukraine in NATO anyway. The whole thing is such a red herring. It's ridiculous. If I understand it correctly, there has to be consensus. All the NATO countries are going to have to agree. They never will agree. I can't imagine Turkey agreeing, and you can name a bunch of other countries that are never going to agree for Ukraine to be in NATO. So why not just take that off the table and Ukraine declare neutrality and let Ukraine say we withdraw any application to be in NATO. Let's just take this off the table. Now let's focus on how to resolve Donbass. But I asked the same question to you. Is the reason why Ukraine doesn't do this is because, as Alexander talked about the Russian oligarchs, it's because the Ukrainian oligarchs are making lots of money out of all this. There's a serious military-industrial complex in Ukraine, and it serves their interest to have all this NATO hoorah, because there's tons of money flowing into the Ukraine as a result of all this.
Paul, you raised a very serious question concerning our foreign policy. You know that during the last 30 years we have a discussion in expert field and the citizens between the taxi drivers, even concerning the NATO. No, I'm telling you the truth. Should we go to NATO, or how to get there? And I'm a specialist in foreign policy and graduated from the diplomatic academy. And for me, it's international relations is a very important sphere. And you know that in our society we have a split decision. We don't have unanimous decision about what to do with NATO. And I always was against integration Ukraine of NATO, and not because of I'm against the United States, against Canada, against Western countries, because I'm a realist. I know that because of three reasons we cannot be in NATO. One reason, this is the absence of the solidarity of the unanimous decision inside NATO. The second reason, this is that we don't have adopt our standards to the standards of NATO, and we even don't have the status of candidate. So we even are not in the beginning of the integration. And the third reason, and that we actually, as Henry Kissinger told many years ago when he gave an interview to a lot of journalists, he always repeated one phrase. He always said that Ukrainian as a country is a very sensitive thing for Moscow, for Russia. And Henry Kissinger said many years ago that the attempt to integrate Ukraine and Georgia towards NATO allies on some kind of bilateral agreement, it would provoke Russian reaction, whatever who will be the president in Russia. And all these things, they were very sensitive and everybody understand. But what happened in Ukraine? In the early 90s, the politicians and the oligarchs, because all politicians in Ukraine, they're financed by the oligarchs, they create this mythology, this political myth about the integration in NATO. And a lot of politicians, experts, they use this myth every year. We are actually, despite that some politicians made the amendments to our constitution that we have official course to NATO and European Union, despite all these facts, we are in fact neutral. We have a military neutral. There are two proofs why we have military neutral. We are not candidate to NATO, and we are not a member of NATO. And the other proof, second, the most important proof, as Serbia had the same situation with Serbia. We don't have any kind of military agreement with any kind of country, Canada or United States or Great Britain, where there will be stipulated the help, the military help, if there will be some kind of aggression. So if there is a threat, we are themselves. We are.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Biden's made it clear. The UK has made it clear. But the thing is that there's this enormous fight taking place over a fantasy, because Ukraine will never be in NATO.
De facto, we are neutral. We have military neutral. But politicians keep on use this topic inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine. I don't know why. It's a very provocative thing, you know, but they keep on using about we will be in NATO, and the NATO officials, Stoltenberg and their generals, current generals or current representative spokesmen of NATO, they never recognized and never confirmed, and they are not now. They don't recognize, and they will not recognize that that we will be in NATO for 100%. So this is obvious facts, obvious things, but part of the society doesn't want to perceive it in Ukraine. That's why the politicians use this vacuum of understanding. They keep on using because of the electorate, first of all, because we don't have any alternative. I mean, the politicians don't have any alternative concerning the foreign policy. We used, because of the prejudice, some experts, to see only two vectors, Russian or America. But if you analyze the United Nations countries, there are 192 members of United Nations country. Only 30 countries are member of NATO. So the other, they are neutral, they are member of different local unions. So the majority of the countries, they are not a member of
Right.
military union.
So why not just so I get back to the same point. I think we're kind of agreeing with each other actually, because they won't declare neutrality because there's more money to be made out of not declaring neutrality, even though that's the reality. Okay, let me jump to Alexander's point. He's saying, yes, you have the position of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian oligarchs. You have the Russian government and the Russian oligarchs. But I think what Alexander is saying is there also need to be a position of the peoples. There needs to be a demands that come of the peoples, which start with stop all the militarization, stop any possibility of any further fighting, and get to a process which resolves this. But I have to ask the same question again I asked you before. How does this get resolved unless Ukraine would accept a legitimate referendum on independence, assuming one could even be negotiated to be had? But I don't see how this ends up any other way, unless it just solidifies with Russia. You know, these states are there and Russian troops are there, and that's just the way it is for who knows how long. But if there is going to be what I would call a democratic resolution, there needs to be some kind of democratic process, which I agree with Alexander, and it's not like in Canada. I fully support Quebec's right to independence. There's been several referendums. They've been very close, and within the construct of Canadian law, the referendums are legal. And if the independent forces had won, Quebec would have separated. They lost by a hair several times. But how is there any other resolution of this that one can call democratic?
Paul, I will tell you, this is my last answer towards your question. I think that the referendum which you're talking about is it's impossible because of two things, because of the two reasons. Why? First, the public opinion will not accept it, I think, in Ukraine, the majority. And the other thing, that the politicians the officials or the politicians who can be responsible for such kind of idea of implementation, we don't have such kind of politicians. So I didn't even hear such kind of initiative from the politician. Maybe some experts can use, but not politicians. So I cannot understand how it can be implemented, at least now. But I don't know what will be in a year or in a month, because the current events are very quick.
Okay, Alexander, well, let me just say, it seems to me you're saying, yeah, there should be, but the practical politics of it is not within sight. Am I hearing you correctly? No, this was for Andre. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding Andre properly.
Yes, I do. That's why I keep silence. Yes.
Sorry. I'm saying it sounds to me like you're saying there should be such a process, but you don't see it as a real political possibility. Am I understanding you?
I cannot say that it would be a variant for I cannot say that it would be exit. I mean the key to the result. So I cannot say that I support that kind of thing, because I know that it can be it's impossible to implement such kind of thing in Ukraine now. It's impossible. So the idea of referendum, this is a myth, and it's impossible to implement in Ukraine because of the many reasons I've already talked.
Okay, Alexander, I think this has been a really important conversation, and I think we should do it again. But I gave Andre the first word, so I'm giving you the last word, Alexander. Go ahead.
I try to be brief. First of all, maybe I made quotation from Lenin, which is for me a very serious expert in political questions.
This is because you were accused of being ideological. Now you're really going to stick it in here.
I'm not. I don't afraid to be ideological, but I'm serious. One time Lenin said that politics appears when millions of people are doing something. When we have discussions between leaders, this is not politics. This is political games. Real politics starts when millions and many millions of people participate in changing of the world. And this is important. I'm not advisor of Putin. Of course, I'm not advisor of Biden or Zelensky or anybody else. But I'm one of the organizers of Russian Social Forum. I will participate in World Social Forum. I participated in Pacific Asia Social Forum. It was open in plenary. And every time I said, we must initiate real mass peace movement, international, with participation of liberals, conservatives, different types of left, green, I don't know, rose, doesn't matter, white. It's very important because now we have growth of tension. From the point of view of political economy, world is moving in the direction which is very similar with situation which took place in the early 20th century, before World War I. It was very close, friendly relations between Nikki, Tsar of Russia, from one hand, and Chancellor of Germany, Austria, France democratic, Britain democratic, Germany democratic, and Austria parliament. All countries are democratic. And then 10 million people killed. Why? Because of economic interests, not because of the games of politicians. Fundamental economic interests. Now we have a very strong movement in this terrible direction. Again, we have new countries which can participate in redistribution of the economic and political influence, and this can lead to the war. That's why it is time to struggle for peace. Then I think we can stress again and again some principles which were elaborated after World War II for United Nations. If you read the Declaration of United Nations after World War II, it will be like a communist manifesto. It was such an experiment in the United States. In the streets, people the Declaration of United Nations was written, and journalists asked to sign this declaration, and people said, no, it's communist propaganda. So it's time to start again this movement. And I want to use your program, Paul, because there are a lot of people, thousands, millions maybe, in all over the world to say this and to discuss seriously this question. In May will be World Social Forum, which is many thousands of different international organizations who participate. It is up to 100,000 participants of the forum in the internet space. And I think we must put in the agenda this question as a key question. And if I can make appeal to Russian government, to Ukrainian government, to peoples, first of all, to peoples of Ukraine and Russia, let's say in Russia and in Ukraine. I have, by the way, chance to talk sometimes in even Central TV of Russia, in radios and so on. I will repeat again and again, no attack against Ukrainian people. I think the same is necessary for Ukraine, for Germany, for United States, everything. This is my final remark. And thank you for opportunity to have this discussion. And sorry if I was not enough correct with in discussion with Andrei. I hope he understood.
I think you both did very well. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Andrei. And let's do it again in a week or two. This situation is very fluid, and we'll talk about it some more. Thank you, and thank you for joining us on theanalysis.news.